AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Tuesday. Welcome back to the show, Bree Johnson from MJSB, Employment Justice. She's kind enough to join us today to talk about the latest with employment justice news. Hi, Bree. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. You know, I'm looking forward to getting back into the studio before too long here after the car accident last month. And so I'm hoping to get back into there before too long, because I have to admit, it was so much fun. The last time I talked with you was the first in-person interview I've done in 2 years. And so I was like, I need to get back and do that. That was fun.
That was fun. Yeah, thanks for having me on again, and hope a speedy recovery for you too.
Thank you very much. The you found okay. I am somewhat shocked. I remember when the Me Too movement started up, and I was informed by some of my female friends of how many unsolicited pictures they get in their DMs on a daily basis. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. The misogyny that of our world there, as much as we've made advances, still exists out there. You have found a story. This is out of Cleveland, Ohio, where, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you just describe what the story is that you came across here?
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. Wonders never cease, right? So
Yeah.
you've got an attorney. Shockingly, this particular attorney, a male attorney, works at an employment law firm. He represents primarily defense side, so company side. He, working with an associate, seems like he was pretty close to an associate, sends this woman a text. So it sounds like she was on parental leave, and for whatever reasons, her own independent reasons, must have been searching for a job while she was out on leave, returns from leave, and shortly thereafter informs this attorney that she's been working with that she's leaving that particular law firm. And he proceeds to send her a text message, and goes on to say really offensive, horrible things, including really regaling how she was collecting a salary from the firm while sitting on her rear, among other things, right? Is just kind of going off on this rant. Rest assured, he talks about karma, how it'll come back to get her. He references how he had told a fellow attorney at the firm to fire her while she was out on parental leave. Hint, not lawful. And so the woman that the partner is talking to must have sent this to a friend of hers, who then proceeded to post this attorney's message on LinkedIn. And it just exploded, right? As unsurprisingly, a lot of parents, and I think it's both parents who take parental leave, face pushback, but typically you don't have it put in a text message. And so it's really been a wildfire. This attorney who sent the text message to the new mom is no longer working at the firm. The firm has had to do a lot of PR, talking about their commitment to diversity, but it really highlights the degree of what's been kind of quickly quoted as mom bias that continues to exist in places.
Well, and I think, as you brought up here, I mean, first of all, I should mention Kelly Barnett is the woman who posted this story up there. She starts off her post it's on LinkedIn. There is an unpleasant truth about law firm culture. It can be toxic. I guess I'll start there. From your experience, and I'm not talking about necessarily anything personally you're doing, your personal experience at MJSB or anything like this, but from other lawyers in the industry, is there a toxic masculinity that permeates in some of these law firms?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I think not only in law firms, but I would just say industries where they're a bit not even behind their times, outdated. There's a little bit of kind of the way we've always done things that hasn't necessarily caught up to 2023 sensibilities, whether that's when you think of even parental leave. You have a lot more men taking leave. I've heard stories about when men do take leave following the birth of a child for their bonding time. This is leave that's given to that employee. They hear comments, sexist comments like this too. And so I think the answer is yes, there is certainly some toxicity that exists. And unfortunately, it's just some of those headwinds that I guess unconscious bias, conscious bias, whatever you want to call it, that do still exist.
Well, this is once again like my first when I mentioned coming in, it's like, really? There's something to do that in their DMs. Okay, really. There is a part of this story which for me is somewhat unbelievable because I'm Generation X. I grew up with, by the end of the 80s, people were talking about parental leave, that this is a good idea, that it's not a good idea to have a woman, give birth on one day and have to be back in the office 3 days later. That wasn't a good thing. It wasn't raising good kids. It wasn't raising good families. These are things that we've supposedly been addressing. So to hear such basic, vile 1960s type of vocalism about the disdain about an individual going and taking parental leave, that's one of those things where it's like, really? I mean, how are you this close-minded and arrogant within your existence, that this is you don't realize the culture around you has changed by decades.
Yeah. And not to mention just the healing and recovery that someone who has gone through childbirth experiences. I mean, I think it's upwards of 30% of births are C-section, a major surgery. And so it's overlooking so many facets of what a parent experiences in the aftermath of having a child, and the way in which that rocks your world, both physically in terms of your recovery and then mentally as you're caring for a child. And we know all the benefits about it, about caring for children and spending that time. And so it's really, outdated doesn't begin to describe it for sure.
Well, and I want to go back to Kelly Barnett's post about this because she makes the point here. She returned from maternity leave a few days earlier, a leave during which she was asked and expected to perform legal work. Does it never cross the law firm's mind that maybe the reason why she's looking for a new job is because she went on maternity leave and you idiots kept calling her and asking her to do her job? I mean, there seems to be just an intentional tone deafness here, which is really hard to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that it continues to just being asked to do work while out on leave, is kind of the underbelly, if you will. I mean, I think that there are certainly good firms and good places of employment that do it right and allow that person to step out and really take that full leave. And there are some where people are getting called, asked to do work. And absolutely, no wonder she wanted to find a new place to work. She said, hey, this isn't going to be a good fit for me.
Well, and okay, and by the way, Bree Johnson from MJSB Employment Justice joining us. So let's run this. You are the lawyer here. Let's talk about all the violations of law we are looking at here. Clearly, harassment by a coworker because you're on maternity leave, that's a big no-no, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the piece that really jumped is the retaliation that he's alluding to, effectively saying, I asked someone to terminate you while you were on leave. And so in terms of the federal protections and Minnesota state protections, we can, I'll just briefly talk about those, but there's the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, and that provides protection for up to 12 weeks. And when I say protection, it's job protection. So her job was protected for those 12 weeks while she was out on leave, assuming, right, not knowing all of the nuances here, but if she had been working there for a 12-month period prior to taking leave, her job was protected. And so him threatening to fire, big no-no while out on leave. Obviously, the firm didn't do that. And then he still spews this ugliness on the backside of that. And here in Minnesota, too, we have additional protections even beyond the FMLA protections with the Minnesota Parental Leave Act. So there's additional job protection that would have been afforded her had this been a Minnesota case as well.
The other thing I want to mention is, okay, so is it legal for a company, if you are on maternal leave, can they, is it legal for them to come to you and say, oh, we have some, I mean, there's one thing about, oh, by the way, we have one form here that, can we send it over to you? It's signed. It just got missed. We need to do this. It's another thing to say, oh, by the way, here's 2 weeks worth of work. We need this to do, since you're just going to be, at home anyway, you can just do this at home. Is it legal for a company to basically pressure an employee to do work while on maternity leave?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put any bright rules out because but in the example you provided, no, if you're being asked to do a lot of work while you're out on leave, then that's not really leave, right? And so it definitely crosses a line in terms of not being something that I would ever recommend an employer do, and certainly not as a, do this or else you'll be fired. Big no.
It once again, we should mention, you did mention this earlier, but I just want to say this lawyer that sent this message has been canned. This once again was in Cleveland, Ohio. The law firm has quickly separated themselves from this individual. But if there's someone out there that's experienced something similar to this, they probably should get in touch with you, right, Bree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see a lot of prospective clients calling us with cases, thankfully not quite as egregious as this particular text, but certainly in this vein, right? Of, I have this leave I've been asked to return because they can't find anybody to fill my position or they can't find anybody to do work. Or I come back from work and I have a sick child, or from leave, I have a sick child. And now I was terminated because I took sick leave. A lot of questions in this vein. We get a lot of calls. And thankfully in Minnesota, there are a lot of protections. So if anyone, any parent has experienced this while caring for a sick family member, certainly get in touch with us. There's FMLA, there's Minnesota parental leave protection. There's also city ordinances now that are cropping up. So Duluth and Minneapolis, the sick and safe time. So there's just a lot of protections as we as a society have come to realize the importance of caring for family members, whether that's a newborn family member or just a sick child, sick parent. There's a lot of nuances and there's a lot of job protection out there.
I find it interesting. If you go back in history, this idea that you shouldn't be able to take any time off because you're lazy, you're just eating bonbons, you're not doing anything. There's no value in this. I mean, it goes back a long way in this country. This country, I remember the blizzard of 1888. People, it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday, and people were trying to get to work in 3 feet of snow. They found them frozen to death in snowbanks across the eastern seaboard. It was kind of one of those things where people just always went to work. We always have this mentality. The reality is we're starting to fix this, even though some of this clearly this resentment towards fixing this lingers.
Mhm.
The legislature right now looks like Democrats controlling the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. Do you think that we're going to get paid family leave possibly being passed in the legislature this year as well, that we're going to actually get legal protections for the workers of the state of Minnesota, so that if they want to raise a kid, that they actually have the ability to take the leave without any consequences?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in the position where we're the closest that we will have been for paid parental leave. And so that's the distinction. The protection that exists is protection that your job will be there when you return. It does not provide the paid element so that you can go and actually have money coming in while you're out on leave. And so that's what Democrats are putting forward. Walz has indicated it's a top priority of his. Just last week, it was in committee hearings. And so what that looks like is potentially, and granted, it's subject to a lot of negotiation, I think, coming forward, but is potentially a state pool that functions kind of like the unemployment benefits pool. And so employers and employees all chip into this pool. And then when someone needs to take paid leave, then they can draw from this pool. Remains to be seen whether it's kind of a partial payment system, a full payment system. But a long way of saying, I do think it's going to be moving forward. I think some version of this will come out of this session, hopefully. There's other states that
Well,
have it too. It's not as though Minnesota would be the first. So there's good precedent for it too.
I know that they're looking in Michigan at expanding it too with their new Democratic majorities over there. The one thing I find to be interesting about this is that, yeah, you do have Republicans who will argue you can't harm businesses. Businesses seem to be doing fine, but you can't harm businesses by doing something like this. But one of the things I found to be also be interesting is that there is a mentality in rural parts of this country where there's a stronger ag sector. And if you were sick, you still had to work. Someone had to feed the livestock, someone had to take care of the crops, someone had to do these things. And so it's to a point, I think sometimes it's a harder sell for rural areas that this is a good thing, that this is something that can benefit you throughout there. And I think it's changing. With the way that the ag sector to a point has shrunk because there's just not as many farmers out there. But do you think that there's going to be a lot of pressure, especially on rural Democrats, that they basically can't do this because that's just you work you work to work, because that's that American mentality that's kind of created this problem in the first place?
Yes, and I think that's definitely one of the attitudes that exists, and also, potentially in the subconscious is, "Hey, I didn't get this. Why do you think you get leave when I had to work through my," men and women may have this sensibility. I had to work through, brought my baby to work 8 days after giving birth, and some of that is just kind of existing in the subculture here. I'm hopeful that the pool concept is at least putting less pressure on on an individual employer, because that's the system as we bank on it right now. Is an employer of a certain size will offer a paid leave as kind of a benefit, but it really depends on the size of the employer, and it's there's so much subjectivity to those programs that are offered. It really misses a large subset of the population who isn't working for the bigger corporations that can offer this type of leave. So hoping for a bigger safety net is the ideal state with the paid parental leave policies.
I actually feel, I mean, I remember when my kids were born, I had all the times they were born, all three kids, I was able to take leave, and I didn't really, it was never even a question. They're like, go. So I'm grateful I was able to get it, but that was 15, 20 years ago. I mean, I think it's time for us to, this is something we need to offer across the board. Obviously, if anyone's in a legal situation like our first story, where they're being harassed for taking maternity leave, they should get in touch with you. But obviously, when it comes to anything with employment, MJSB Employment Justice is a place people should call you, Bree, and talk. If they've got a question that they might get help from you with, they need to get in touch with you and talk with you, correct?
That's right. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Bree Johnson, managing partner of MJSB Employment Justice. Bree, as always, you're always welcome on the show. Thank you very much for joining us. Interesting story. I'm glad there's some level of justice, but my God, it's about time we get rid of the misogyny, isn't it? I think we did. I think it is personally. I'm stunned this stuff is going on. I mean, and I get it because I'm stunned because I'm the guy and I don't see this, but it's stunning that it's like, who are these jackasses? Will you shut up? My God.
Hmm.
So, that's
Indeed. Thank you.
that's me. But I have a much more colorful way of saying it. That it's just, this is why I was negated from being a lawyer, because I can't control what I say. Bree Johnson, as always, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Take care.